Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Office Hours with Dr. G. I'm Dr. G. I'm your host. And as a disclaimer, I am not a medical doctor, but I do dispense information, confirmation, and inspiration.
Yeah.
Tonight, I have a very exciting show that's near and dear to my heart as a former apostle and pastor. My guest is Dr. Ernestine Brown, former apostle pastor, and AKA also known as Sister Ernie B. This formerly frontline firebrand apostle and I are going to discuss what happens when the pastor wakes up. Dr. Ernestine Brown experienced a profound spiritual awakening, which redirected but did not curtail years of work spent providing housing, support, and counseling to women in crisis, abuse, and addiction. The short version of Dr. Brown's personal journey and the main reason she will never stop working with women in need, even though she now embraces an awakened holistic lifestyle, is that at a critical point in her own life, she went from serving as the assistant director of child and adolescent mental health service for Baltimore City's health department to being herself a beggar standing on the street corner. She knows from experience how far a person can fall. Dr. Brown, who I'm proud to call my friend, is a certified Usui Reiki Practitioner, and she holds a Doctorate of Ministry, a Master of Divinity, and a Bachelor's of Mental Health Administration. She is exploring all of the options that come with awakening, and I am pleased to welcome to Office Hours with Dr. G, my friend, Dr. Ernestine Brown, aka Sister Ernie B. Wow. Thank you so much. Welcome. You know, I was going to get crazy on this one. But I thank you for taking the time to sit with your sister and talk about something that, you know, at least I can actually get into, because I have myself experienced what we would call an awakening as a former pastor, apostle. Like I said, we were firebrands, both of us. I did not read your religious biography because I know you could probably talk about some of the things that you have experienced during the course of this conversation. But there were so many people that are, as they say, caught between two opinions. You know what the word said? They're not sure in these days that we're living in exactly which way to go. They're feeling different things that they have not felt before with regard to their so-called spiritual life or religious beliefs and so forth. And you know, people are confused. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I believe that there are many people who are, I would say, stuck in a pattern and looking for a way out. And that's all a part of the confusion.
Well, yeah. So let's go. Let's start at the beginning. Let's go. I don't know. I almost want to sing. You know the song that said, "Let's go back. Let's go way back when." You know, did you grow up in the church like so many have? You know, grown up in the church. I mean,
Yeah, I did. I had my beginnings in the church world as a baby. I often try to use a little humor when I tell people about my beginning. I say that, normally when a baby is born in a hospital, they had the process where the physician or the doctor or whomever delivered the baby would spank the baby, and the first thing the baby would do would be cry. However, I tell people that when I was born, they spanked me, and I immediately began to speak in tongues, as they say in the church. So I've been in there from the time I was born until I began to experience this awakening.
And before we get to your actual awakening, your progression, so to speak, through the ranks of Christianity. Um, you grew up in the church, and were you active? I mean, were you actively being groomed to be in the ministry, or did you get, as many people say, we got the call and so forth and so on? How did you go from just being a regular churchgoer to one who was preaching and teaching and laying hands and healing and delivering and all of the stuff that you eventually did?
Well, I like to say I came from a family of preachers, teachers, and pastors. As a child, I was always a leader. So within the church world, they always found a place to put me where I was in charge of something. I'll give you an example. As a young person, I was the vice president of the youth and young adult department. I was the choir director to the youth department. I was a junior missionary. Um, I went through that process because as a young person and the time I was growing up, originally it was not acceptable for women to be in ministry.
Mm.
However, I always sensed a extra particular call on my life to speak. And they would always find somewhere for me to do that in lieu of making me a minister. But as I progressed and as I grew and I understood what was going on with me at that time, um, once I was a young adult, I began to find other ministries that recognized the role of women in ministry and allowed me to go forth as a evangelist, then as a elder, then as a pastor, then as an apostle. So kind of traveled that road to and to leadership as I was growing.
Well, now my own path was early in my early years. My mother didn't actually go to church, but saw the need to send her child to church, and so I remember the deacon that would pick me up. I don't remember him, but I remember being picked up by the deacon and taken to the church, which was probably about maybe 5 blocks away from where we lived, where we domiciled. And so I went as a child, and I did the little, reciting the pieces and all that. But when I got old enough to say that I didn't want to go to church, since nobody else went to church in the family, it was just, okay, we've given her that experience. And if she doesn't want to go, then, we're not going to force the issue. Or I don't know whether there was any discussion, but I too, like you, was always, and this was more to the family, always put in a position of they would put me in front of everybody to sing and perform and dance. I was like the little, minstrel, if you will, of the family. And the interesting thing, when I'm hearing you, it's always things for you to do, is that fact that you and I are both Pisces. We're both Pisces. So it's interesting that we, our paths crossed almost a year ago, because it'll be a year, I want to say, in the next week or so. It was in July of 2019 when I was on the Lance Scurv show. I had appeared there, and afterwards, I'm not sure what the date was, but it was around July, because I saw the email you sent me, and you told me that you were a pastor in transition, and you had heard me speak on the show, and that's how we initially connected. But when, since then, we have so many parallels in our life. Now, the only thing is, like I said, I didn't grow up having, doing all those things in church. But when I did get to church, and I'm skipping over all of the going and coming back, but when I finally did go to church on my own, I was always, I was into designing. I had my own business where I did desktop publishing back then and different things. And so I had a fairly, responsible job at the time. And so all of the gifts that I brought with me when I went, people always found a way, the leaders, to hone in on them and want to, use, everything that they could, for the upbuilding of the kingdom. So I got very, very, very involved as you did. But like I said, early on in life, I didn't have that youthful indoctrination. And I think, and I don't know what you think, when people go to church as children and are, like, I've heard people say, yes, I was on drugs when I was a child. Yeah, my mama drugged me to church every time the doors were open. You know what I mean? Sort of that, so to speak. I didn't have that experience. But when I did go, I too felt I want to say initially there was an issue that happened. A lot of times people get there through trauma, something devastating happens. And I can't remember exactly what it was, but it got me there. And eventually I stayed for maybe 25 years before my awakening occurred. And, I'd seen some things in that period of time and heard some things that I didn't necessarily appreciate, because it wasn't my perspective. Because I don't know about you, but I was always been a person that based my life on truth and realness. And so to me, who you were in the public should be the same person that you are behind closed doors. There should not be, there might be some level of, you might have a little bit more merriment and mirth with you when you're amongst peers, as opposed to, say, the people that are looking up to you per se. But it should not be such a drastic difference in your character that one would have to wonder, based on what we thought meant salvation, are they really saved?
Yeah. Well, the thing for me, now, Dr. G, is I was one of those kids who enjoyed going to church. Let me say, it was mandatory in our home, but for me, it was not a pull or a struggle. I enjoyed it at the time. There were days when my parents would say, "Well, we're not going tonight," and I would actually stand beside the door and cry until someone would come pick me up and take me. I think I really enjoyed the ability to just, it was building skills in me. It was building leadership in me. It was bringing out something that was already there. So I was allowed to bloom there. However, even in the midst of that, and I'm talking about a time period before I was 18 years old, I often sense and verbalize that something was wrong, that something was off, that this was not just it, that there was something else. And I believe that was because I was always a seeker. I was always looking for, as you just said about the integrity and the character of the people who were leading me. I looked for something in them, and I did not find it. And it was easy to see because the people who were leading me were family. So
Okay.
we all lived in the same neighborhood. My pastor was my grandfather, and my grandfather lived across the street from where we lived. So we had the opportunity to interact a lot with one another after the church doors was closed. So I too saw a different expression of life once folk left the church that did not add up to what they were presenting while in the church. And that bothered me. That bothered me a lot. And the other thing that bothered me was because I saw the style of the leader then was such a dictatorship type leadership that it kind of stifled. You could see the stifling of all the other people within that congregation. And I will often question my mother when I saw things or I heard things, or I didn't see the adults responding to the leader in an adult type manner. And it was often said back to me, well, I know what you're saying, but just don't say anything. And for me, because part of the greatest part of my existence is that my voice is what I was given to use most skillfully in this earth realm, that I didn't understand why I couldn't say anything. I did not understand why I couldn't question anything. I did not understand why all the adults were almost afraid to confront the leader. So I always had a lot of questions around what we was doing, why we was doing. And one of the main questions that always stayed in my mind is, what was the origin of what we was doing? And no one ever could tell me what the origin of things was. Where did it come from? When did it start? Why are we doing it? Are we just doing it because someone told us to do it? And of course, I was that child that kind of got on their nerves.
But we were told, especially as children are seen and not heard. And then when it came to the church, you never questioned God or the word of God, for the word of God was inerrant, without error. But myself, I remember, and I'm still like this. I'm very analytical, and I'm a critical thinker, and so I'll hear what you say or what somebody says, and then I can't leave it alone because it's up rattling around in my brain, being analyzed as to the validity of what was said. Now, whether or not I need to, store this away as some truth or fact in my life, or whether I should discard this. You know what they say: you eat the meat and you spit out the bones.
Yeah.
And so it was very contradictory, oftentimes for me, especially as I remember. I remember as an adult, I went to church at this point. I was telling you, now I'm there on my own. I'm on my own volition. And I remember the choir, the pastor being also heading the choir and so forth, and recognizing at the time my ability to sing. And I was, in the choir and so forth. And I remember we were going somewhere to another state, like this neighboring state, to go and either, I don't know whether we were going to sing or whether we were going to hear another choir sing. And I picked up the pastor, who was, remember, the choir director and the keyboardist and so forth. And when he got in my car, he he lit up a cigarette, and I was shocked. You see what I mean? Because I come from the world, but I was of the assumption that many of the things that we did in the world, you know, we folk in the church did not do this. You know, we didn't smoke, we didn't drink, we didn't fornicate, we didn't cuss, as they said, you know, and fight and all of this stuff, or connive and steal. But oh boy, was I wrong. I was wronger than wrong. I was wrong as two left shoes. And I remember him saying, "Oh, you don't mind looking at me like, you know, I'm in the driver's, like, you don't mind, do you?" And that was back in the day when you could openly smoke in public, but to see, you know, the man of God pull out a cigarette was like the first indicator of a moral breakdown in my mind. So it was like ding ding ding, you can preach to the point where you are mesmerizing people. And literally I've come to the, you know, you've done it now, I'm sure, and I have, you know, we can stand up, and if you're a good orator, you know, if you have the gift of putting those words together, and if you could throw, you know, and if you could tune up, you know, somewhere in the midst of it, people would lose their all sense of what makes, you know, what's reality. And it's funny because they've had little satires where the preacher has the congregation so worked up that they falling all over the place, and he's talking about peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and you know what I'm saying, he ain't even talking about what's in the book and, you know, that, but they just talking as if they said cash trash, and they're so on by, you know, the work up, you know. That's why we always started, you know, I realized how many things started with praise and worship, because the music and all of that ability to, and we're people of expression, can get you worked up and get you into another realm where now you pretty much have done the same thing that a hypnotist has done to the people. And they just receive. But I was probably the one that was sitting there going, you ain't getting me. You know, I'm going to keep my mind open and my head, you know, on straight. And I'm going to analyze what you say, because it don't make sense to me. 1 and 1 is not adding up to 2. And things like that. Those are, you know, sort of things that happen as I was, you know, I was in one church, and it was earlier in my time, and it was a wonderful Kojic ministry, I thought, and the choir was, you know, Kojic people, women with the hats, and the choirs that could sing. They could really sing, you know. Church of God in Christ, they could sing. But when I left there, I ended up went from the Church of God in Christ to Baptist. So I mean, it's like a regression when you think in terms of, you know, shouting and praising and going and basically sitting at a Baptist church that's more, you know, the oratory is more of the emphasis. But I left the church and I ended up in another church, and another minister, elder, who ended up subsequently being a pastor himself, and I met up at this new church. And so he put me on game. He hit me to what was going on had been going on all along at the previous church. And it turns out that there were lots of shenanigans and sexual, you know, depravity and all kinds of foolish, you know, things that went on in the course of, you know, you might sing and hear the word and fall out, but when folk got together afterwards, as I say, after the benediction, you know, there were some people, not everybody, but there were some people that were involved, you know, in some, I don't want to call them nefarious activities, but it was ungodly, and it was pretty well known. But what happened to me is that I always found myself in any church I went to, there was like the inner circle. I always was outside of the inner, but inside of the outer. So I would be far enough in to be respected by leadership, but far enough away to not be affected, if
Yeah.
you will, because people did some stuff, like I said, they allowed themselves to be, to lose the sense of right and wrong just because of, say, a man or woman of God, and those other folks that were in leadership had sway over them and knew their weaknesses. And instead of, like, you've worked with women, I worked with men. Once I started pastoring in 2001, I had a regular open door to the local men's prison that's not far from House of Real Awakening Minds.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there at least maybe 3 times a week on pods doing one-on-one counseling, and at least once a month to preach the chapel services. And these were men. And I was younger. I think I was, fairly attractive and that, but my head was on straight. And so my looks at the time gave me an advantage that I got their attention. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But my words cut like going in and coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And there were lots and lots of men who made decisions, to turn their life over to Christ, so to speak. And some of them even subsequently, when they were released, upon their release, came and became a part of the ministry that I was leading. But in all things, it was important for me to be integral, to keep my integrity intact, that there would be nothing whatsoever that anybody could go back and say that I did that was out of character. Because as you said earlier, women, first of all, they didn't want us to say anything or to preach. A woman preacher was, like, what's she doing? Who she thinks she is?
Yeah.
Didn't Paul said, well, I do not, suffer a woman to teach a man. But the fact of the matter is, especially in when we recognize who we are as Moorish women now, that masonry is the men, if you will, mother and son, and that the very first teacher of a son or a daughter is a mother.
Yeah.
So what was your experience as you were moving from those roles of we'll let you do this and that to, I know I've got a voice and a calling to go deeper in this work?
Well, it was interesting because I think I had one of the things that was important to me because, again, coming from a family church, you knew everyone, and within that, and we were a small congregation of 100 people or less, and the leader there was so such a dictator that folk was almost afraid to do anything outside of the realms of living holy. So for me, I never uh, looked at any of them or saw any of them in an ungodly or unholy way. As a matter of fact, I used to say that if there was such a thing as heaven, I knew one person who would be there, and that was my mother, because my mother really lived her life to exemplify and put into practice everything she was taught in that particular church. Um, I just knew from and even coming from that, that just put something in me that even to this day is a part of who I am, because I believe in integrity. I believe in character. I believe that the pastor there used to have a saying that your word is your bond, and that was the only thing that you had. But to equate that to something, we would be saying that you had to have integrity. So I often tell because it was a bunch of young people in our ministry, and they did all sorts of things, and they tried to include me. But at that time, I was the one that did not participate in the running behind the church before the prayer meeting and smoking the marijuana, or to be running around in people's houses you're not supposed to be. And I wasn't the one to do all of that, because they have really gotten it into me that you must live holy. And I tried as best as I knew how to practice that. It was as I got older and I was in another church with a particular bishop who really had great influence over women, and really accepted the fact that women were in ministry, but he was in a male dominated organization, that all the leaders were males. They decided to allow me in the executive board room. I believe they thought they were bringing me in as a secretary, someone who would take notes, but in any situation, if I heard something that needs to be adjusted, if I heard something that's out of order, I'm gonna offer an opinion whether you accept it or not. So I began to say I knew I was moving in the right stream, quote unquote, organizational structural stream, when they let me in that room. I was the only female in a room of about 20 male bishop pastors and leaders. And I used to laugh with the other sisters because they were kind of scared to say anything. And I said I had invaded the good old boys club. So when I invaded the good old boys club, I knew I was on my way to somewhere. Where they had first ladies who were adorned in their finest apparel, but they sat on the third and fourth row. I sat on the first row. So to me, I was gaining ground within that arena. And from that point forward, I kind of became, I almost want to say that it girl. I had certain organizational leaders that would have led me all the way through the ecclesiastical ladder to success. However, in the midst of all that, I was just questioning everything, and I just knew it was this inner knowing that this was not it for me, and this was not the route I would continue in, and that there was something else. It just took me a long time to really come to grips with that, because the church for all of my life was all I knew. I knew nothing else. If you didn't look like me, if you didn't dress like me, if you didn't talk like me, if you didn't worship like me, you were not saved and you were on your way to hell. I come from that type of religious upbringing, so it really was a difficult task to begin to transition into who I really am, who I was born to be, away from religious constraints.
What happened? I mean, well, you know what? Before we get there, I want to go back. I mean, because all the while you were doing this, most of the time, like I said, like me, you had a regular position. You went to college. You have a degree in mental health, and you had a position, assistant director. What was it, for children and
Yeah,
whatever?
Baltimore City Health Department, Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services.
Right. So you were in the church, I'm assuming, and because you grew up in the church, and then you went to college, and you had this position. Now, you don't say, and you don't really have to get into the particulars of what happened, but I know that the work that you do, I mean, to me, ministry is ministry. Ministry has nothing to do necessarily with my newfound understanding of it necessarily with the church. When they have ministers of commerce and they have ministers of finance, so they don't that. So when you have a service to something or someone or some group, then you are ministering to them. So at what point do you go from being the assistant director of that agency in Baltimore City to, I don't know, you didn't say you were homeless, but to a beggar on the corner? I mean, it's something that you can talk about. I mean, is it anything you want to talk about? You may not want to. And
no problem with you talking about it. Let me see. Before I did that, let's see. I did everything, like you said. I did everything in the morally prescribed manner. I went to high school. I graduated from high school. I did not have any children um, until I was 22 or 23. I was married. I'm coming straight out of the church, going to college. I was very naive. I got my own apartment because I actually had a job and was in college, had a job. Father was so strict that the curfew was 12 midnight, and I'm gonna say I was a sophomore, junior in college, and I got to the house at 12:05, and he told my mother I had to go. So that led me to getting my own apartment, and I still had a job, and I stayed in college. But on the job, I met my husband, and my husband was not a church going man. However, because of the way I was raised, my father only said to me, well, you can't live with a man and not be married. So that caused me to get married just behind those words as a way to please my family and uphold religious belief systems. The marriage did not work out well. The best thing I got out of it was my daughter. It did not work out well. So, because of being in a bad marriage, I found myself experimenting with all kinds of things, including drugs and alcohol. So, I was able to maintain myself, maintain working for Baltimore City Department of Social Services, working my way up to the Assistant Director of Mental Health for Child and Adolescent Services before I would say what they were referred to as hit rock bottom. So as a result of hitting rock bottom, I found myself unemployed. Did I have a roof over my head? Yes, I did. But how do we define homelessness? Well, back then we defined homelessness as if you did not have a lease with your own name on it, you were homeless. But of course, we stay with family most of the time. So I was kind of lost from that period, from I'm gonna say from the age of 33 to 40, I was really lost. And that's the time period where you will find I had left the church. Um, I really, I don't know. I really will say when I'm doing a workshop or when I'm talking to people, and I don't often tell my story unless I'm led to tell it. But what I will say is I had to go the route I went to be able to serve the people that I serve.
Mhm.
If that make any sense to anyone, it makes sense to me. I had to hit that particular spot in my life because of church. I was one of those self-righteous, judgmental, better than you persons. So if I was going to serve my purpose in existence, I had to understand, not just understand, but be the person whom I was going to help find a way to betterment. And that's what I take away from that experience. So as a result of that experience, I did find my way back to the church. And what the church did for me at that point was to allow me to stabilize. I had other resources in place that were helping me, but the church gave me a sense of a foundation, of familiarity. I understood the church. I knew the ways of the church. I knew the people of the church. So I could do the church. So that helped me through that critical path in my life. And once I was free, I was clear, I was healed, because that's what it really is, a healing process that was not just about the place I found myself in after the bad marriage, after the molestation, after the rape, after all the things I went through as a young person in the church to bring me to that point.
Wow, I'm sorry. You mentioned, now back up. You mentioned a lot of stuff. These things happen, and that's the unfortunate thing. So many people have an experience. Again, I started out talking about how these men and women. We can't leave women out because there are a number of women who have turned out molested, other women and maybe even some boys. So it's not just men under the guise of church leadership. And so, here you are in a church and still, it's instilled in you fear of God, fear of going to hell, fear of dying, going to hell, not pleasing your pastor, grandpa, father, all of these things. But yet you have things, and you're not the only one, where things are happening that are in complete opposition to the things that are being taught. They're not being, they're behind closed doors, and we don't talk about it. I know a person in particular, they may even be listening to this show or maybe afterwards, but who shared with me an experience where the family was in the church, the pastor molested her. When she spoke up to the parents kind of almost blamed her, and then didn't want her to talk about it, and because they didn't want to lose their position.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the unfortunate part about position with our folks. Is like, for many of our people, the church was the only place where they felt like they could be in charge. Beside their home, they could be in charge. They could be the head of the usher board, the head of the deacon board, the pastor, whatever in the church. Where outside of that, they might have been, cleaning Pullman cars or being janitors in the drum or whatever they were, making all that. But in the church, here they were with this position, and it was lorded over other people, because it was almost like, I don't feel like I'm anything out there, but in here, I'm gonna make you feel like I'm better than you.
Yeah. Well, I begin to see how it was at some point in our existence as melanated people, that was the only place where we found prestige.
True.
It was the only place where we found respect. We couldn't find respect in any other area of society the way we did within the church. So that began to be a great aspiration of many, because if I could get that deacon title, if I could become a trustee, if I could become the president of this, Auxiliary and the president of that auxiliary, how important I would be in the sight of other people. So to me, that speaks to a sickness, the psychological need in some of us to receive that kind of prestige any way we can get it, even though there are so many. And then, see, I talk about, like you said, we started out, I talked about all the good stuff, but there was a whole lot of things that happened to me as a child while within the wall confines of that walls of the church that kind of scarred my personality, scarred my psyche, um, traumatized me, that I had to really seek healing from in order to be a whole person. That was part of the reason why I knew that there was something more to this whole thing, to the church, because of what I saw, what I heard, what I witnessed as a person in the church. So, but I still often will say, regardless of all of it, I had to go through it for it to make me who I am today. For it makes me to understand who I was called, who I was born, who I was positioned to be a blessing to in the African, well, I hate using the term African American or Black, but in the community where people of color reside at. Because what all of that did for me was to make me very resourceful, very knowledgeable of systems, very knowledgeable of means and ways to get services for people who were neglected, rejected, and pushed to the side, people who lived under poverty, we used to call them special populations. And when I say special populations, whether that was somebody in foster care, whether it was somebody with mental health needs, whether it was somebody with substance abuse needs, whether it was somebody in the homeless population, it didn't matter, because the experiences I had gave me the opportunity to learn the resources to grow from them. But everything that happened to me was not for me. I always say this, and I'm grateful for this. The experiences I had was not for me, but it was for me to gain what I needed to be able to be a resource to my neighborhood, to my neighbors, to my community, to my city. And that's how I got into we call it ministry, but I always would say I was an unconventional minister, because what I did I received the vision to do it in 2000, and that's when I began to work with men and women who were in transition from any unhealthy lifestyle to a more spiritually based one. And when I say that, I say I always was at that point I was unconventional, because I had been through the whole church routine. I had saw what they did. I saw that things wasn't getting better for them, so I always knew there had to be a better way. So my contribution to the world was to work with these. First, it started off with women, because what I did in 2000 was to open up a row house in Baltimore City, which was only had 3 little bedrooms. And if you ever been in a little row house in Baltimore City, they're not that big, but I was able to put 8 beds in that one house and serve women. It didn't matter if they were coming out of jail, if they were coming out of the detox center, if they were homeless, or if they were coming out of the psych ward. It didn't matter. I provided a transitional living experience for them, but at the same time, it was inclusive of support services. And support services was the Making Peace with Your Past groups, the women's support groups, the NA groups, whatever. It became an individualized service plan generation for each person who was in that particular house, and that was 2000. But then I grew to the ability to serve 42. I had 42 beds. They were men and women beds, because the thought came to me after a couple of years, well, how are you going to keep on serving women and help women get their stuff together and do nothing for men when we need to help our brothers also? So that's when it became inclusive of men, and I was able to provide 42 bed spaces in the city of Baltimore for women and men who were going through life transitions. And I often would say it was very unconventional, because it wasn't about did you believe in Jesus. It was whoever needed help, come to my house and we're going to help you. And we collaborated. We got memorandums of understanding. We built partnerships with the already existing community service agencies in the city to be able to plug people in so that people got what they need. And at the same time, it was a self-development component where people were able to work on themselves internally and come to a place of healing. And that right there was what I was supposed to be doing with my life.
I think it's interesting that you like you said that what you experienced was sort of preparatory, was in preparation, and I can really relate to that. In my sometimes, like you said, you sometimes you get so far away from where you were that you forget, unless a conversation or a situation arises, and it's you remember, like, oh yeah, really, you did that too, or that happened to you, or something similar happened to you. And my sort of come to Jesus moment from a standpoint of what happened and was painful, but realized it really wasn't for me. I think I had two of those. One of them is that my life was threatened. I got with the wrong person, because a lot of women find themselves in relationships with, I kind of did one of these. I jumped out of the frying pan and I landed right in the flame. So, there was this, character there waiting to help me out of my situation. And instead of helping me out of my situation, I was put in another situation. And so when I found myself, trying to get away from it, by the time I was trying to get away from it, I was, with a very good Job and taking crack cocaine to work with me.
Mm-hmm.
Smoking rock, me, Dr. G.
Mm-hmm.
And I was my life was threatened, and to the extent that it set my blood pressure in my system out of whack. And so I remember the doctor putting me in a place. We have a place here called the Rockford Center, and I was put in a mental institution. One, for my own good, supposedly, and two, because that's when you find out that you've been suppressing things. You know what I mean? I was a smoker. I had been in the military, and I had picked up the habit of smoking in the military. And I remember a moment came when I was in group therapy, and I was smoking a cigarette, and I said, something like, what the hell are you doing? You're killing yourself. I'm choking and smoking, right? And I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm in a group there. I see myself sitting in that group therapy again, and I'm not doing this anymore. And the brother was sitting near me. He's like, you don't want that? And he took the sick, because that was back in the day when you could, I'm 64. I was like 30 or something.
Mhm.
30. I was 30. I may not have been 30. I don't even know. Quite 30. But you don't want that? Took the cigarette. And I remember going into my room, and I had a carton. And I handed him the carton. And I haven't had a cigarette since that. This is over 30, 30 some years, probably more than closer to 40 years. But it was a moment in a point in my life that I had to go through. And then I fast forwarded, I think, just a little bit. And my only daughter died of crib death. And as painful as that was, I realized just in just a few years afterward, how many women that I ended up ministering to who had lost their children to sudden infant death syndrome mostly. And one of the lessons I learned, because I had 3 sons, and the tendency sometimes is when you lose a child is to grieve so much for the lost child that you completely neglect the ones that are living.
Mhm.
I had to come to terms and come to grips with that about my sons. And I met other women within in the years that followed, that were going through the same thing. They lost their child, and their grief was so strong over the loss of the child that they didn't want much. They weren't even tending to the needs of the children that remained. And then I realized that, okay, that experience was not just for you, but it was for all of those that you had to get healed from, and then take that truth to others who may not, who may have gone over the edge. I mean, there was one woman that wanted to commit suicide because of the death of the child. And life goes on; it has to go on. And then unfortunately, one of the things that the church instills in a lot of us is the fact that, if you don't live right, like my daughter was 7 weeks old. She didn't get baptized. She didn't get christened. She went to, so they want me to think that she's in hell, a baby. It was crazy. It was foolishness. I mean, for a while, the little demon that was knocking on my brain was saying, you killed her. You killed her in the middle of the night.
Mhm.
And I was like, then I had to jump back and go, here I had a child that I slept with in my bed for about 6-7 weeks and never, ever rolled on her, let alone whatever. And the first night that I put her in the crib in her room is the night she died, the first night. And so this little, these little demonic energies want to come and take you through. So I had to get through that, because there's guilt. Parents were going through guilt. I laid the baby down, and maybe if I had just stood over him or her, I would have seen, or this and that and the third. But she had just gotten a vaccination, 6 weeks, right after a 6 weeks checkup. She was 7 weeks old. There are all kinds of things, and all they can call that for numerous babies is sudden infant death syndrome, or crib death, or SIDS, or whatever. And it's been 38 years. It's been 38 years.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that it doesn't hurt. You know what I mean? Yes, it hurts, but not to the point of where, as scripture says, where I have no hope, because I happen to know that it really, she came in to do a play a role like each and every one of us, which is not what the church teaches. That we choose our life, we choose the circumstances of our birth, and we choose the circumstances surrounding our transition out of this one earthly lifetime to another. But we don't teach that in the church. Instead, we instill fear in people that, if you're not saved, from moment to moment, you can be driving in your car and you can be, as you call it, super saved, and let the wrong person cut you off, and you done lost your salvation. You done call them everything but a child of God, and you might turn your wheel too sharply to the left or right, and next thing you're out of here. So this thing about salvation and whatever, was instilled in people with fear in the church, but yet we saw these people And he experienced things with people that were in leadership that was anything but believing the very things that they beat into the brains and hearts and minds, if you will, of the sheep.
Right. But when you say that, I think about how we used to, one of the teachings um, in the church, and there's a book, I can't remember the author, but the title of the book is They Smell Like Sheep. And within that book, it talks about the nature of sheep. And the nature of sheep um, is a dumbfoundedness. And I believe that's a great part of what goes on in the church. It's a brainwash. It's a mind wash. You're not to use the brain that you were given. You're supposed to blindly take what's being given to you and to follow it, and to believe it, and to hold on to it as dear life. And it does everyone involved a disservice, because when you live like that, you are not allowed to experience the fullness of the replica of of who you are and what's in you, and what you've been given, and what's your task, and what's your purpose in existing. So you can go for years and years and years to be stuck in that position. That's why today I'm real appreciative of this time, and of this awakening, and of this opportunity to even explore beyond what I was given in my beginning, and to really, 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 really dig and seek, and to find out what is really truth. I believe that particular phrase is what led me, what ushered me, what prompted me to keep going, because it's ironic. The name of the ministry that I had, and I want to get back in a minute to how I went from that unconventional practice of just serving people to becoming a full-blown incorporated religious organization. But the motto of the particular ministry that I was leading was Kingdom Seekers Seek Truth.
Mm.
Always, and that's you'll find that in the sacred texts. Uh, Seek ye first the kingdom of God and all his righteousness, and everything else will be added unto you. But we used to always say, Kingdom seekers seek truth. Kingdom seekers seek truth. And as the more we said it, the more it got into my being, the more I sought truth. That as I kept digging and digging and digging, I came to this knowledge of, Ernestine, you've been following the wrong path. And once you get to that particular place, it unravels, it shakes, it breaks your foundation. And I believe that's part of where you came in when I saw that you were a former apostle, pastor, and I heard you talk. And it's that when you fall, you don't really have a landing space. You just fall when your foundation is cracked, and there's not a lot of people left to uphold you, to encourage you, to support you, to strengthen you, to inspire you, to uplift you, because they think you're absolutely lost your mind, and they all scatter.
Mm-hmm.
So you're left by yourself. So now you're fighting with, well, is it right or is it wrong? Should I go or should not go? Um, but that's when you look for other people who are like-minded, who share an experience you have to help you further yourself along in the journey with more knowledge and more understanding. Because you know what? For a lot of years, I was really clear of where I was going, but it was that. It was like this. I knew what I was supposed to be doing, and it wasn't in the four walls of a church building. I had those houses, I did those groups, I brought in therapists, I brought in advocates, I brought in substance abuse, I brought in mental health, I brought in whatever services they needed. And I knew that was the way I was supposed to be doing what I was doing. But I had a particular apostle, bishop, world known in my city, who kept after me. Every time I would run into him, he would say, Ernestine, when you gonna let me ordain you? Ernestine, when you gonna let me install you? And I was clear. I was real clear. I was like, I don't need all that. I'm okay. Just the way I'm gonna do it. And it would go by for a couple of years till finally he kind of wore me down with that. And I went to meet with him, and he got to talking about ordaining me as an elder and installing me as a pastor. And I remember that day clearly. And I think I said it. I said it enough to know that I got on his nerves saying it. I said, okay, that's fine, but I don't have any intention of doing ministry, but the way I'm doing it now. Okay, that I understand it. That's fine, but I have no intention of doing ministry other than the way I sense I was called to do it. Well, I said it about 6 times. The seventh time, he completed the sentence for me. He said, I know, you don't have any intention of doing ministry other than the way you were called to do it. However, once I allowed him to lay hands on me and ordain me and install me, I took on that religious uh whole
That
religious,
persona.
what I want to call it. It's another word I'm looking for. Persona is a good word, but it's more like the whole religious monologue, whole religious protocol, whole religious systematic way of structural way, ritual way, traditional way of doing ministry. I became a church. I became a church. And that was where I'm going to just say I really screwed up, because that was not what I was supposed to do. So then now you have me back on with the mask of a church. Now because I'm Dr. Ernestine Brown. Now because I'm the chief executive officer of Sister to Sister Transitional Living Program. You know that puts you in a when people feel you got something going on. I had another friend used to tell me they like what you do, but they don't like you. When they can put you out front to make them look good, that's what they do. So I became the Apostle Bishop's it girl. He was going to lead me all the way through the ministerial hierarchy of the church. But somewhere along that line, I just became not willing to go that line. And once I became not willing to go any further along those lines, that's when everything kind of fell apart for me. And it's been real scary. I'm gonna say for the last 4 years, because everything that I knew for most of my life disappeared. Everyone that I knew for most of my life disappeared. I kind of went to those who were still following me, and I kind of told them that I was going another way, that I would not be continuing in the faith. I said, but there's some other things I could teach you. If you want to follow me, you're welcome to. But if you don't, I can set you up with some other folk I know, because I did not want to destroy, because I knew how hard it was for me once my foundation was destroyed. And I did not want to just uproot them, because there was a lot of older people who have been traveling this way. I've been saved, sanctified for 50, 60 years. And I didn't want to really hurt those people or destroy those people. If that's what they wanted to stay in, or that's what they wanted to believe, I was willing to make sure they got somewhere where they could still be nurtured in that environment. But I knew for myself personally that I couldn't go any further.
What
So,
happened? Do you? I mean to cut your wisdom, but was there any one thing? And I know, like we both talked about all along, there are certain things that didn't sit right with you. But was there any one thing in particular that was, like in my case, I had an experience. Was there any one thing that happened to you to just say, this is it? I'm not going to. I can't do this anymore.
yeah, that's funny. It wasn't like I always used to tell people I was the one out. If they always talking about how great God was, the Christian God, I was the one that was waiting. I was actually expecting him to. I expected to be traveling, whether that was walking or in my car, and I expected this great God to split the sky open and say, "Hey, Ernestine, I'm talking to you." But that never happened. I think what happened for me, and it's funny because my daughter, my kids didn't really, my daughter had an experience in church when she was younger, because during that time I worked and my mother watched her. So my mother took her to church with her. And I have two boys born in the 92. Now, they didn't have a church experience, because when they were coming along, I was doing a women's ministry thing. And my boy said, "Mom, we don't want to hang around no bunch of females all the time." So I didn't. And then my thing was, I wasn't going to make them go to church. If they wanted to go, they go. If they didn't want to go, I wasn't going to force the issue. But it was my daughter, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. My daughter's one of those people. She's married. She has kids. She's into um, natural, holistic, and natural approaches to life. She was following the Pan African Society here in the city, and she was a vendor because um, she has a business, and she makes all Afrocentric purses and earrings and shea butter and all those things. And she eats healthy, and she teaches her family to eat healthy. But she was going to a vending at a lot of Pan African events, and I was going along with her to assist her at her table. And then there were some good speakers coming to town, like Dr. Claude Anderson, Professor Smalls. All of those guys was coming, and that always interests me. But it wasn't until I started going with my daughter that I remembered that I could go down in my basement, and in a storage container, I could find the book, The Isis Papers. I remembered that I could go down in the basement and find a book called The Destruction of a Civilization. So I started to listen to Dr. Ben, and to all those great scholars of Pan Africanism. I would listen to anyone who was talking about how the melanated community could prosper, be successful, and be better, because I was interested in that, and it drew on my heart, and I realized that that was always in my heart. So I began to pursue it more as truth, ever, more than I ever had in my entire life. I just began to pursue it, but it was like something that there was a reconnection made within my spirit that made me realize this is the path I should take. This is the path that is for you. Because you said something earlier, I was always outside of the circle. I was never glued to anything. I might have been around people, I might have known people, but I was never solidly a part of anything because I wasn't made that way. I was made to be aloof. So when the time came for me to see the awakening, I would be able to embrace it and take it and not really over concern myself with going this path alone and not having all those other people who celebrated me when I was this great apostle, this person with the gift of healing. But those things that they put title on in Christianity are things as people of color or melanated people that our ancestors had and we were born with anyway. We just didn't recognize it because we had no one to teach us the truth about what it was. So it got played over into another arena disguised of other things. So I felt my whole natural self becoming who I was born to be.
Wow. Yeah. So, it's interesting because there's so many people who
Mm-hmm.
are, are struggling. I used to say that there are people that feel like they are bipolar or that they have some schizophrenic issues that they're dealing with. And a lot of these people, if you delve into their life, they're church folks that are confused because they've been taught something completely different and they're experiencing their own awakening of sorts, and their gifts and so forth is they're hearing, which is clairaudience, and they're seeing, which is clairvoyance. They're knowing, they're intuitive, but they think they're crazy. They're the so-called veil is being split, and there's the various realms, if you were, dimensions are bleeding into one another, and they think that they're hallucinating. Because these things have never been a part of the so-called church as we have been told the church is. What I've come to realize that through, especially under Granshi Tashtarik Bay, is that the church is really means circle. And it's interesting when they look back, the old folks used to sing a song that says, "Will the circle be unbroken?
Mm-hmm.
By and by, Lord, by and by." And the church means circle. And so to me, it is that union, it is that infinity, so to speak, of the fact that of the interconnectedness that we have to and with everything and everybody. As you said earlier, when you were in that religious bag, you felt, you had a air of superiority, and everyone that did not believe like you, think like you, go to even, we went to the extent of didn't even go to the church that we went to. If their church affiliation was different, and there was something wrong with them. And so, everybody somehow feels like they have the lock on who God is and what the right church is. Everybody's running around with a piece, if you will, of the mirror or the puzzle, that if we would all come together and lay our pieces down, they will begin to make the big picture. I of the mind that time is now, fast approaching, with the awakening, because people are afraid of the apocalypse, and then we are in the apocalypse. Apocalypse means revealing. It means that like a time of uncovering, and so many things are being revealed in this year of 2020 vision. And it may seem like the worst of times, but it's also the best of times, because we're seeing things for what they really are, and we have the opportunity to make sound decisions now about things that we thought we could not live without. We're learning we can live without. 21 days makes a new habit. They kept you from church and clubbing and shopping and a whole bunch of things for more than 21 days. And so a lot of people have come to the juncture in their life, and they're like, you know what? Okay, yeah, they open this stuff back up, but I realized that I had some habits that I needed to break. And so this has been good for me. I don't have to get my validation from being here or going there or having certain things. In my being, I'm enjoying life. I'm loving nature. Just to go outside and put my feet in the grass, that is a spiritual connection. And so these types of things are happening in mass to people. People are seeing this now, and they're going, hey, I don't really need what I thought I needed. So what do I do with myself now? And then you have, I'm sure many are scrambling to find their lost sheep, but I don't think the sheep are lost. I think the sheep that don't go back are the sheep that realize that they shouldn't have been sheep all along.
Right. I just think I believe like you do, and I believe that this just to me, this is the I hate to tell my age, but I'm 60. My grandbaby always tell my age for me every time she see me, and I had to ask the grandbaby, why do you insist telling me how old I am? But at this particular juncture in my life, this particular time in my life, this particular time in the world and in world history, I consider this a great time. I do consider this the time of the awakening. However, I do realize that everyone is not going to wake up.
True.
And I do realize that, we can't spend our time on those who choose to continue in a falsehood. There will be some that it always remind me, now I look at the sacred text and I look at it different. I'm not one of those ones yet, like some of the folk I know, who know all that great etymology and all the great symbolism that the Bible presents. But I know the practicality of it. And I do know that there will be those who will connect, who will find. It's almost like finding your tribe or finding your nation, and who will be looking for that which is truth. And they will connect with folk like us who have been through. And this the beauty of this, and even the beauty of this evening, because how do I say it? Because I think people trying to have tried to figure where I am and what I'm doing, but you inviting me on here this evening is another level of freedom for me. There's a great level of freedom for me, where I'm really okay where I am, and I'm really okay with what I'm experiencing and the newfound truths that I am beginning to embrace. And I'm excited just to be in a position where when those, because I have a nephew, I have a niece who's a pastor and who has traveled the path that I travel. But I look at posts from her son every day, and he's in that vein. He's not following the family path. He's following the path of truth, and me and him have connected. And even when I talk about the few people that stayed behind, three of the greatest people that stayed behind was my mother and my brother and my aunt. And they still expect me to come every Sunday, but the difference is I never open up the Bible anymore. Not that you can't find some principles of truth in it, because I do realize that, but I'm teaching them what I'm learning, and they're receptive of it. So I know that there's a small portion of people who will come out of this whole being able to be still, to listen, to hear, to do self inventory over the last couple of months, will come out of it differently, and are going to look for people, for places like the House of Reawakening Minds, for platforms, for other people who will help guide them and teach them through their new journey, just as someone did for each of us. So I'm just glad to be in a position where I'm still learning, I'm still gathering information, but at the same time, I'm able to pass it on to the next. It's almost like setting the captives free to another person that will come out of the bondage of the church, and I'm satisfied with that at this point in my life.
I will say that what you might want to do is pay attention to your Facebook friend count. I always know when I say something controversial, I always see it drop in my friend. And I know when I struck a nerve, which is all right, because I got like 100 and some folks in the queue who want to be. And because right now I'm very, very, very focused on who I accept as friends. I go to the page. I got to see what kind of posts they're making. I'm not trying to make, I'm not trying to get rid of anybody that I knew in my previous state of mind. But I'm also, but if they can't flow with me, or at least view me with respect from a distance, then see ya. Like I said, I have so many folks that are in my mental graveyard that you would be, amazed at how many people. I have funerals all the time, mental ones. They did. Because we're not in the same place anymore. And like you said, while everybody's not going to wake up and so forth, as a result of your awakening, my awakening, there are those that are specifically designed for us to interact with. I found that I was told that maybe about eight years or so ago, and I found it to be true. I've literally had people say to me, Dr. Naila or Dr. G, I've been looking for you. And I have people say that to me. Don't worry. They came to my aid when the church went the way it did, and everybody that was there except for a handful, and they eventually left. There was a few. They tried to hang on, but they were so indoctrinated, and they needed the shout in the group and all of we had one of them Holy Ghost filled sweeping down victory. I mean, we have a praise tape on clip on YouTube that I put out there maybe 10, 11 years ago, that probably has 1 million views, of the young people at my then ministry church shouting their butts off. I mean, this was the kind of place, the floor would be doing like this. It was so much going. If you were downstairs, you were like, oh my God, you looked up like, they get ready to come down. That they could not get themselves out of that conditioning, the praise, and they didn't realize that these were the things that worked them up so that they can be like bamboozled, so to speak, and brainwashed and told anything. But with a sound mind, critical thinking. I would say to them, I said to them about, this ministry, I'm not trying to collect people. I said, this is not a place, really a daycare center. That was one of my mottos. This is not a daycare center. This is a deployment center. So I would say, you come here just like you go to the gas station. You get your fill and then you gas up and you go forth to serve. You don't idle at the pump when you get the gas until you burn out. And most folks like to just, you fill up and then shout it all out and then come back and get some more. That's not how, true ministry, if you will, true independence is given to people. You don't need to have the same people for 35, 40 years sitting up under you doing nothing. We had a ministry I was a part of, and I was a part of as a pastor. And we had a name, and I remember preaching a sermon which says we were talking about a fresh harvest, and my sermon was, are we reaping or recycling? Because we always talk about reaping the fresh harvest, but we were recycling. We were getting the frustrated folk from church across the street come around the corner to the church, over here. And the church, from the church, they get mad at the pastor across town, and they go in and they talking about church growth. And all we were doing was recycling the same people, because then they get disgruntled, or if they heard a good choir or a good sermon from the visiting pastor, these folks, they want to run right, they jump up and they want to go over there because that seems to be where smoking, what's going on. Instead of people finding out what it is that they incarnated to do and doing that. And so, like I said, for myself, I was sitting in a church service, had an out-of-body experience. When I came out of it, the voice said, you must stop lying and tell the truth. Lies of omission, lies of commission. I wasn't committing lies, but I was omitting some stuff because I was just repeating the things that I had been taught and indoctrinated in, the things that work, instead of following my intuitive mind, my knower. And I always knew I was intuitive, but I didn't know what to call it. I knew that I could stand up at the pulpit and people would come there and I could speak right into their lives and say to them, look them in the eye. And I'd be saying in my brain, they wouldn't know it. I was like, where is this coming from? But later on, I learned it was called intuition. They would call it word of knowledge. And I was like, okay, but I would just speak right into their lives. Well, I could do that today. I didn't lose that. You see what I mean? The things that we came here with, we actually have. It's just that you call it one thing within the confines of the church and you call it something else, psychic prophet, same thing. You know what I mean? And then, now, when we in this awakened state, though, we have gone, you and I, we took a cross-country trip last October to another fellow Piscean sister. See, we could talk astrology because we're not scared of that, because we know that that's about us, right? We went across, we took 2,000, was it the 2,000 and some
miles? Yeah.
We drove across country. We weren't Thelma and Louise, but we had some experiences driving to Little Rock, Arkansas. Saw a UFO. Did we not?
Yes, we did.
We saw a UFO in the sky. And then later on, I hear the man on the radio talking about the very place we was, that we saw it was a hot spot for UFO sightings, and we showed up, saw it. I mean, we got to go to places and experience stuff, and we dug for diamonds, and we came back with crystal. We came back certified, but I went and got recertified. You're now certified as a Reiki practitioner. We are energy workers. We've always laid hands, but we did not do it with the knowing or an understanding of what we were doing, that it was our openness to receive what was coming from above. We weren't doing nothing but being conduits and to send that energy where it needs to go, because he knows where to go and what to do. But those kinds of things, and I don't know if I told you this, I ran into a pastor that's around here in this area with a very large church and ministry, and I was trying to say, when they saw me, one called me woman of God, and I was like, didn't get the memo. It's been all these years. So I called myself trying to correct them and tell him politely that I wasn't doing that anymore and hadn't been for a while. Matter of fact, we come back from Little Rock. And I said, matter of fact, I've just come back from being certified again, as level 2 Reiki practitioner. And he told me, he said, I took Reiki, and he's level 1. And I thought to myself, well, now. So when he's laying hands at the altar, now he's actually doing Reiki. But
Yeah.
as they said, would to God he tell his congregation that he is doing Reiki. It's laying in hands, Reiki, same thing. But we know how to direct that energy. So what I'm saying is we have grown in our acceptance of the fullness of what we came with and what we came to do. Would you agree?
I would agree because the ability to meet a person and know particular factual things about them, I actually had since I was a child. Um, and it was always easy for me to meet a person and know things about them. And I never knew what it was because again, you had no one to teach you exactly what it was. And then when I was in the church, they always would say they wanted to call me a prophetess at one time. Um, then I had a bishop who would take me with him. And when he met new people, he would put me in front of them first. And he always would say, if you stay past the hi, my name is, nice to meet you, then that person is okay. But if I didn't stay that long, that person was not okay. But what was that? That was just me experiencing their energy. Some people would say their vibration. But I never knew exactly what it was till I was older because I believe in just by virtue of our astrological signs. We're spiritual people. We're not. We were born spiritual. We weren't born religious, but we were born spiritual. So there's always that spiritual component to us because it's a inner thing that I have, and I know that you have also, and it operates um, naturally. It operates whether you're in the church, out the church. It's going to operate because it's actually who you are and what you were born to do, and that's just one of the gifts that I believe I have that enables me to help bring others from their dark places into a more healthier place so that they can continue to become the persons that they were created to be.
Yeah, and we still, we still find ourselves, like you said, being of service to others. I mean, that I don't think that changes. It hasn't changed for me, as I know for a fact that I get phone calls. There's not a day that goes by that someone doesn't call House of Reawakening Minds, and I end up giving them some level of assistance, and I call myself the connector because I'm always connected people,
Right.
places, things. And so I do that because I do that from my heart. I've helped strangers, get for tickets back home, and I didn't lay eyes on them. I mean, it's because that's what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make us a bad person. We're not bad people because we are not, sitting up there banging the tambourine, tapping on the floor and shouting all over the place and saying, Jesus, that's us. We're not bad people. Matter of fact, I felt like when I gave that up and walked away from it, that I became a better person because like we talked about before, I wasn't judgmental. I wasn't discriminatory. Saw the connection between myself and nature and everything, started picking bugs up instead of smashing them. And, like the spider comes in, if I can, I'll help you out the door, spider, because, you and I are connected. But if I can't, I might kill you, but I'm going to feel bad about it instead of not caring. So because I felt begin to feel my connectivity or my oneness, if you will, with the divine creator and with the universe. And that's one of the things that when you get away from dogma, because again, we were saying about religion. There's nothing wrong with true religion, but
Right.
as it's been said, we've not gotten that. We've gotten the doctrines of men. We've got dogmata, and we've gotten things that, it's not hard for people to not follow who know better, who have
Right.
been taught. So when you take a book that people have grilled into your head, is the inerrant word, the voice of God in print speaking to you, and they know, instead of it being literal as they teach it, that it's literary, because that's what they teach, like at Harvard, Divinity, and Yale Theological, all these different prestigious Ivy League colleges. You go to schools of ministry and theology like we did, and they're going to teach it to you as an inerrant book. It's the word of God. God said it, I believe it, that settles it. You know what I mean? There is no failure in God. And then we learned that the word God is a Middle English word that didn't even exist at the time when they allegedly, the story is taking place. So, we learn these things, but yet it's hard to get these things across to people who are yet asleep and deeply indoctrinated. But like I said a few minutes ago, just pulling them away for a couple months of having to stay home and stay in, I believe, has done wonders for waking people up, at least giving them a sense of, let me listen to something alternative, just to kind of test why I feel like I feel, and I think that was a good thing, although I don't like I abhor the reason why it happened, because I truly firmly believe in my heart that it was all put together for nefarious purposes. But other than that, there's always, every cloud has a silver lining. And instead of us looking at the glass half empty, we need to start looking at it as half full, and we can put the other half in it and fill the doggone thing and let our cup run over if need be. When you get the right information and inspiration in your life, you can fill not only your cup, but you can fill the cups of others. And there, like you said, there are still those out there that need to hear from a former, pastor, two former pastors, apostles, people that are betwixt and between and don't know what, people who have lost. I would love to speak to those, I feel like I have a handle on the process of birth, and what we call death or transition, that I would like to put minds at ease. I would like to do, and I probably will, because I got the platform to do some teaching. And even if I'm talking to no one, when it gets replayed, somebody's going to hear it, and perhaps it'll ring true for someone who is hurting, and because they've lost a loved one or loved ones, and they feel like, no, that person wasn't saved, or where are they, or even for their own self. And I'm dealing with this even for my own self, but I feel like I've gotten stronger and stronger on the subject of my own eminent, and when I say eminent, is inevitable, not imminent, inevitable transition. Is that the only thing that I've been trying to remember is, how did I plan? What was my plan on my exit plan? In other words, I know I'm leaving. So did I plan a good exit that wasn't painful? Because I know that whatever I plan, however I go out of here, whatever it costs me, whatever it feels like to get out of here, that the expansiveness of who I am will be then one with divine creation again, and I would have forgotten what I went through to get back to where I came from, if that makes sense. And so able to take that's the kind of things, as we are growing, there's a reason why we were pastors and apostles, because we needed to be able to wake up after that, and then and have our feet in both worlds, in order to pull people to safety, pull them to shore. I don't want to call them, saved, because what does salvation mean? Because in the sense that we've been taught, I throw that out the window. We can never be lost. We may have to do some stuff over, but we're not lost.
No. At this point, I believe, because even in my my I have a secular job, and and I have two jobs, both of them easy as heck, but it's both of them are assistant program directors. One of them is in a crisis center, and one of them is working with women who were formerly homeless and they must have a disability. So I still get the opportunity, and the only thing I live for at this point, where we may have called it getting people saved and getting people delivered, I look forward to bringing people to a place of healing through a holistic approach to living. And if I can just empower, inspire, uplift the people who I come in contact with, I will say that I'm serving my purpose to humanity. And that's all I believe that the Creator wants any of us to do, is to serve human. And I'm really, 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 really um, just impressed with being of service to my own people, because there's so much pain and traumatization within our own community. And I always say, and I use this word, ain't nobody coming to our rescue. So we have to rescue ourselves. So I am dedicated and committed to serving people of color and just bringing them to a place of truth where they recognize who they really are and what they really can do. And that's my service to mankind now.
Well, I'm, because you my sister, and I love you, so I'm gonna help you with the color thing. We not people of color, because color, okay, no, and I know you'll receive this because color is like color of law. We not color. We're not colored people, and we're not Negro people. Right. We're not Black people.
Right.
We're melanated people. We're Moors. We're Aboriginal. We're originals, indigenous, whatever you want to call us. But and I know you mean well, and I know you, and I don't say it to belittle you, because I know that you are growing. I know that you recently asked me about nationality, so I was like, yeah. And it's a process.
But what's the funny part of it? The funny part is, because I know since the census originally started in like 1860 something, that's when the people who were indigenous to this land became colored people. Then we became Negroes. Then we became Black. Then we became. It's just so funny because we've been so many things sometimes. All those jumbled up things that they.
One family line, One family may have 4 different, nationalities, if you will, and so, and they call it race. They call it race, and there's like I said, there's only 2 races: the human race, and the hybrid race. So which race are you? So it's not even race, it's our ethnicities, but so to speak, just so you'll start to, there's those couple things we try to get out of our system. Kids, we don't call our children kids because those are goats, baby goats. We call ourselves a people colored because that word is just not who we are. But it's cool because I can, but I'm saying we are so much so alike, and we spent almost about a week together and had a ball, and connected with our sister Deborah, our sister Deborah Thompson Bay in Little Rock. Shout out to Sister Deborah, who's rocking and rolling with the now she's a holy fire baptized Reiki level 3 something online energy worker, and we love her. And we want her to. We want you all who want to get your Reiki. We're Reiki practitioners, but she is the Sister Deborah Thompson Bay is actually the one who taught us and did our I almost said laid on the hands, but she did our certifications. And now since we've been there, she's a master teacher. Now she's going up a couple more notches into something else. And she's certified to also do it online. So she can do a video call with you and you be able to feel. And she's an awesome, you didn't get to experience it, but she's an awesome massage therapist. Because I was in pain one day, and she took me to to her the office and just work. I didn't even want to get up off the table, and a loctician. I mean, and we the sisters in the 60s, it's funny. I mean, and we're all Pisces, you know what I mean? And it's our time. It is our time to do what it is we are doing, for such a time as this. And we have to be a part of the same soul group. You're talking about finding your family or your squad, or your tribe, but we have soul groups. And a lot of times these soul groups spend time through various lifetimes playing different roles in different incarnations. But that when you get in next to or back in fellowship with a kindred spirit, someone that you just connect with, and you may not have ever seen them, you think, in this lifetime, but it has nothing to do with this lifetime. It has everything to do with all of the lifetimes. You know what I mean? And so we're trying to get people to open up their minds and realize that, particularly if they're watching, and I don't know, what would you give as advice to someone who may be viewing or who will view this interview and they are still, kind of caught up, but not being pulled about their religious beliefs and so forth.
I think the most important piece of advice I could give to anyone who is at that threshold of discovering is to don't be fearful. Don't be fearful. Just embrace it. Just embrace it. Don't be fearful, because I always talk about that fear and that fear that paralyzes us. And you can, when fear sets in, you can see something right in front of you, but you dare not reach for it because of that fear. And fear will keep you confounded to that place. And I would just say, just break through that fear and just embrace the new, embrace with the unknown. Just embrace the unknown and reach to learn new things, and just don't be confounded to that old mindset, that old way of thinking, because there's much more that we have not experienced, and there's much more to discover, and you have to not be afraid to walk into that place.
I think that's good advice. That's excellent advice. And fear is, like you said, has been the barrier between success and failure in a lot of people. I mean, some people are afraid to succeed. Some people are there are people, unfortunately, that are counting on us as a people to be fearful, that they're doing things to scare us, to scare, if you will, not the hell out of us, but to scare the hell into us. You know what I mean? To scare, but we, and even that, hell is the debtor's prison under the king's chamber. That's what the executor chamber was what was called hell. And so people, get all caught up in and thinking that they needed to, it's a place of hellfire and so forth. And it's just, it was a physical place where people were sent that couldn't pay the debts that the king imposed on them. And now what we have is the IRS. So that's the hell. That's the hell on earth. And so, people need to, see things for what they really are, And Nabi Paul said, that God has not given us the spirit of fear. That's right. But love, power, and a sound mind. That is correct. Mm-hmm. That is correct. And we didn't give ourselves the spirit of fear. Right. We learned that gets instilled in us once we get here. Because like I said, we have all these plans we make up there. We be like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna come down there. I'm gonna be, I'm gonna be Shirley and Otis's child. I'm gonna be them together. They're gonna come together, even if they don't stay together. But I'm gonna come through that seed, and I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna change the world. I'm gonna do this, and then we get down here, and we get indoctrinated, and we forget. We forget what it is we came to do, and so our life is spent on a quest of trying to remember. When you come into your kingdom, remember me. I've been dismembered, disconnected from purpose, disconnected from the power that I brought with me, and remember me, reconnect me to source, so that I can operate at full speed, at full blast. And it doesn't matter, if a person is, we hope that everyone comes to the place of realizing their true nationality and birthright, and does not allow themselves to be, labeled and branded, if you will, and, from one thing to another. I wish Black lives was really something that really did matter.
Yeah.
But because we're not Black people, one, we know it has nothing to do with us. And two, we found out that, people who are supporting it are mostly, what do you call it?
A whole bunch of initials.
Well, a bunch of Albion daughters that are college educated, except not Amanda Siegel. She said, she's not one of them, but Amanda's my girl. But most of them are college educated, and they're supporting the Democratic Party, the so-called Black Lives Matter thing. It has nothing to do with melanated people. You know what I mean? And I'm saying, folks, church folks, if ever before, you are supporting, and don't get me started on the Democratic Party, because this might end up being one of the ones they shut down. Don't get me started on them. Hey, Amanda, don't get me started on them, because that's, to me, that's the demos. Those are the demos. And so they have never done nothing for us but lie to us. I'm not saying that the other one did anything either, but I'm saying that they definitely have not. And so, to me, we need to do what Martin Luther King said but didn't do, and that's remain independent. We need to vote for ourselves. That's what we need to do. We need to vote for ourselves, right? You know what I mean? This thing is going to be to plug in my computer. I guess before it goes off, I didn't know it was unplugged. Oh my goodness. Let me just back up. Let me push the button down in there. So, I don't know what I did. But anywho, we're getting ready to stop anyway, so hopefully we won't go off before. But listen, we got like three minutes. Let me see where this thing is. I do not want to be shut off in the middle. Let me see where the end of this thing is. Here we go. Keep talking. I unplugged it. I thought I was unplugging the fan.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't want to. We talk about these important issues concerning melanated people. My pet peeve is with those who are in the church and what type of stand they're taking during these times. And it's unfortunate that they don't want to really get involved in the things that will help the majority of what they call parishioners. So we just have to keep digging and keep plucking away and raising up the awareness level of others, so that our causes can be heard.
I think, though, what I've come as I just wrote a piece, and I'm thinking that it will probably run in CME News. Sister Cynthia Martin L. I'm one of her writers for CME News, and I wrote a piece. I think was Dr. Martin Luther King, Democrat, Republic, or Independent, and I put a lot of stuff in that piece because I just want people. A lot of times we are devoid of facts, and so one of the things, and I had written it, and then I ran it through Grand Sheik Taj Tariq Bey today, and so I did a another rewrite, because you cannot have a conversation with him without coming, with your head, without your head exploding with other knowledge. But I was able to see something, and I put it in my piece, and that was the fact that we talk about civil rights and so forth, the civil rights movement, Dr. King, but the civil rights movement actually derailed the liberation movement. The liberation movement was what Medgar Evers and Fannie Lou Hamer were pushing. Liberation, getting out from under, this European colonial, occupation, if you will. The liberation movement got hijacked and turned into the civil rights movement for the benefit of the 14th Amendment, which, of course, so we need to know this. We need to know this. We talk about civil rights and all that. No. It was a liberation movement. We need to be liberated. We need to be, emancipated from all of these things that have nothing to do with the organic constitution, for the United States. And so when we start to get that in, those levels of truth, I think they do something when it gets on the inside of a person. When it's truth, you know what I mean? I'm not saying that everybody that hears the truth embraces it, but there's something about the truth that is easier to digest than a lie. You might digest lies and make them a part of your, being, but it's not as easily digestible. Sometimes we wrestle with it and then we resolve. But when it's truth, it goes down like, like a smooth, a cup of tea, so to speak. It's not hard to digest, but we're trying to bring truth to people, to liberate people. And I'm, like I said, I am so appreciative of you coming on tonight and doing this, because I'm sure that there are others. I want to thank those that have stayed on for the long haul, because normally, we're doing like metaphysics or we're doing some Moorish stuff, but I need the viewers to realize and to recognize that office hours with Dr. G is broad. So, there might be a former pastor one week and an astrologer medium the next week, and anything in between. So this is not strictly about more science like our Friday night, House of Reawakening Minds presentation, which we will have, coming up this week with Grand Sheikh Taj Tariq Bey. But we are bringing a variety of information, and it's something for everyone. And I'm, like I said, very appreciative of your time and how you've shared. And as the prophet said, the half hasn't even been told. We didn't even get to tell. You didn't tell it all. I didn't tell it all, but we told enough that I believe it's going to help someone. So I don't know if you have any last parting words. We'll give you the chance to get them in.
No, just thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I always used to say, even when it's best not to take a particular title and just be open to be a vessel of whatever comes your way in order to help the masses. So we can't be stuck in one vein if we're going to be effective in the time that we live in. So thanks a lot for having me, and I hope that something that was said helps someone who was listening or who will hear this in the future.
I want to thank you so much. I want to thank you. And we're gonna close with our Dr. G theme song, which I just kind of love it, just not because it's saying my name, but just because it's saying my name. But thank you so much. And what I love the fact is that when I close out, a lot of times I can see where people are still on. They just listening to the music. So we're gonna groove out to Hassan's work, and you're working along with Brother Hassan. Shout out to Brother Hassan Ghaziel Bey for your astrological needs, and Brother Antonio and Sister Mia for your 720 blends, and me for your silver. I mean, Sister Ernie B got some stones and crystals and Reiki. I do Reiki. You know, we got so many things going, and we want you to know that if you have a business or a service out there, I have been running this banner. But if you have a business or service and you want to put your product or service out there in front of thousands of people, we have thousands of viewers, Sister Ernie B. So if you have a business or a service, contact me at Glitch, because I am the glitch. I am the glitch in the matrix. glitchccm at gmail.com, so that we can put your banner and let other people know what it is you do. Very, very reasonable, not trying to hurt anybody, but everything that comes here helps with the House of Reawakening Minds. We don't get as much support. The House of Reawakening Minds, other things are going on right now. But we still need to keep up the support going. So everything that comes through here goes to House of Reawakening Minds, and we greatly appreciate it. Again, thank you. Thank you, Sister Ernie B. Thank you, you, and you. Let me see if there's anything. Oh, Sister Nadine, thank you so much for doing the silver. Okay, we get ready to go out with our theme song, and let's see what it be. Till next time. Dr. G. Really? Who's she? Yeah, that's me. 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 Dr. G. Really? Who's she? Yeah, that's me.